Ha 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 ha! So, you have the courage to hear the untold tales of Douglas County. Then why not begin with the chilling ditty that concerns an old acquaintance of mine? It's called Satan's First Visit to Castle Rock. It appeared in the Castle Rock Journal in 1900. I'm out upon my yearly mission, finding souls to fill perdition. But if this my soulless muse someone should perchance abuse, I'll send them my address, so they can get redress. But I ask that they'll be prepared to go when I return to the realms below.
Oh, Norlock. Why do you tell such children's stories? Come here, darling. Now, I have a much better story involving a haunted castle. Frank Kistler was a respected and wealthy gentleman, a man who moved confidently through the upper echelons of Denver society. Throughout the 1920s, Kistler lived in a mansion in present-day Highlands Ranch. He lived in happiness with his wife Florence and their 4 children. The youngest of the children was a girl named Julia. But happiness can be oh so fragile, and once it is lost, it is not easily regained. Twilight fell on Julia's perfect world the day Frank Kistler divorced Florence. Kistler was quickly remarried, this time to Leanna Antonides, a younger woman of well-known charisma and beauty. Leanna and Frank were married in Hawaii in February of 1929. The newlyweds sailed through the Panama Canal and honeymooned in Paris. Florence left the mansion, as did 3 of her children, but Julia remained behind, determined to stay with the father she loved. But Julia's stepmother brought 2 of her own children to the household. And while Julia's father once doted on her, he now spent his free time with his stepsons, and when weather allowed it, he took to the horses with the boys and rode wide into the countryside and the hills that surrounded the mansion. Julia remained behind, forgotten by her father, separated from her mother. Some say that Julia is in her room still. Her sorrow is much a part of the mansion as its brick walls and long hallways. To this day, strange lights appear in Julia's room. Noises can be heard throughout the mansion, and objects below the girl's room have been seen to move, as if disturbed by an unseen hand. And passerby still see on occasion a young girl staring from the room, waiting for her father to return.
Oh, that was delectably ominous. Now that reminds me of Mr. Canterbury, who lived out near West Creek 100 years ago. I'm certain you will agree that he had a very amusing hobby. This is how the newspaper reported it. Mr. Canterbury's spare time is spent in killing flies and keeping an accurate record of his daily killings. In front of his cabin, he has hung a large white cloth. And on this, he has written the number of flies He had slain daily for the months of June, July, August, and September. Each day's record is carefully kept, and the total foots up the sum of 7,423 flies. Now, dear, it's not polite to eat in front of the guests.
Oh, darling, there's plenty more where that came from. Why don't you tell another story while we have a little snack or two?
Haha, let's go back to the book. Few people remember the old rail siding at King. In 1901, the only structure at the siding was an old boxcar used as a depot. It was staffed by 2 telegraph operators who were charged with maintaining the track in the area. When night fell, there was not a friendly light for miles in any direction. Beyond the boxcar depot, there was only empty prairie. And maybe something else, pacing away the midnight hours. At first, the sightings of a strange apparition were written off as another kind of spirit. General Superintendent Parker of the Santa Fe Railroad went on record as saying that perhaps the specter was an effect of too much drink. As reports from reliable and sober witnesses kept coming in, another theory was devised, that the spirit was a prank, a light, maliciously cast by a lantern. But the specter was too clearly defined for such a trick of light. A beautiful woman, witnesses said, dressed in a white burial gown. Some said that the woman was not a ghost at all, but a widow driven insane by her husband's death, wandering aimlessly through the night. But there was evidence that the woman was not a corporal being. It surfaced in November of 1901 when the woman's appearances were chronicled in local newspapers. Engineer Gene Smith was the first man to report the rape. He was bowling merrily along King a few nights ago. Coming from a deep cut in the rail bed, he saw a woman in white on the track. He reversed his lever and shut his eyes. His ears were strained for the bump an engine makes when it strikes a human being, and for the blood-curdling cry. But it was nothing. It was not a woman in the flesh, but it was a woman in the spirit. Others saw the ghost as well, always throwing herself upon the track. Eventually, there were too many witnesses for the railroad to ignore. There have been so many men report the ghost that there is a suspicion in the mind of Mr. Parker that there is something wrong somewhere. So he has started a personal investigation. Just who the ghost was, or what her business with the railroad was, has never been discovered. But as you lie down in your warm, safe bed tonight, imagine the 2 men in the boxcar depot, alone in the darkness, except for the pale woman who walked the tracks outside their door.
Norlock, I think that's enough scary stories for tonight. We don't want to upset our guests too much now, do we?
There are many more tales to tell. Perhaps you'll visit us again.